Good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and editors and journalists and writers and really anybody putting stuff out in the Bronx. And in our second segment today, we're going to talk about the legacy of actually not a Bronx baseball player, specifically Roberto Clemente, and somebody from the Bronx who did something incredible in the great ones name. And so we'll do that in our second segment. But in our first segment, we're going to meet frankly, a new reporter covering the Bronx. And so let's say a good evening to Jonathan Custodio, who covers the Bronx for The City. And nice to meet you. Nice to have you with us, Jonathan.
Likewise, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Gary.
What I learned about you is this: you got the responsibility of covering the Bronx for The City, and for you, this was a homecoming. Talk to me a little bit about your background. Let people know how well we can relate to you because of where you're from and where you're at.
Yeah, I was born in Lincoln Hospital, raised on the road. It's very much been just a full circle sort of experience for me. I went to Cardinal Hayes High School, eventually went to Lehman College, did some reporting for a local outlet, Norwood News. Shout out to them. Very much honed me as an intern. And, from there, journalism, you kind of go all over the place. I ended up in DC last year working with Politico after I worked with them for a while in New York. And I did a fellowship there. And, ultimately through that fellowship, I understood that I wanted to come back home. The Bronx means so much to me, and to cover the borough is like a dream job. So, yeah, I saw the opportunity with the city and I was like, man, this is
Wow.
just.
This we love Bronx people covering the Bronx. I don't have to tell you because you know how we feel about people actually understanding what's going on here, and people dropping in from elsewhere. So it really is. I'm thrilled that when you say, hey, a dream job covering the Bronx, and of course having been raised through grassroots papers like the Norwood News. Great, 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 great. Happy to have you. What is it about journalism and even covering the Bronx, but what is it about doing this work that inspires you? Because it sounds like something you started with and then you said, wow, I think I really like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I'm sure other reporters say this all the time, but it's just straight up talking to people. You hear so many fascinating and important stories that really resonate with you when you're out sort of in the streets, talking to people. And I think particularly in the Bronx, in a borough where, kind of like you alluded to, a lot of people parachute in, having that sort of ingraining yourself within the borough and like talking to people, and people can kind of recognize, that you're from there. I think it jumps up another level, and sort of having those underrepresented stories brought to the forefront is something that's really important to me, and I take a lot of pride in. And I think that
Wow.
pushed me as a journalist.
I,
It's
I, I want to stand up and applaud because you said all the things that are like music to my ears. I've been doing this for a long time here. So let's talk about something you covered. And if you born and raised here, you know about the Kingsbridge Armory. We have been talking about this thing for a very long time. We had a plan. I happen to have thought it was an interesting plan, but of course, the people who ran it didn't really. It appears didn't have the resources to do it. And now we're back to square one. Where are we at? What do you know about the Kingsbridge Armory at this point?
Yeah, we are back to square one. So right now, it's sort of in the community engagement process. The Economic Development Corporation (EDC) and the city, not the city, but New York City, said they would start that process, which is about a 6-month process, by the end of September. And that sort of involves, official feedback from community members, what exactly they want, what they would like to see there. Organizers held a rally last month to sort of push this idea of equitable redevelopment, and that would mean prioritizing local hires, environmental sustainability, and a big one in terms of cooperative ownership. They want to have a say in sort of what they do with the land and also the building itself. and they felt that, that's an extremely important part of this process that they sort of want to make up for in the last process. Obviously, like you said, it sort of took a tumble. It was supposed to be a national ice center, bunch of hockey
And
rinks.
it didn't work out. I want to go back to this notion of community input because for that project, it was really an historic community benefits agreement that was passed, which included many of the things that people wanted. No sugary drinks for sale, extra, I think it was 50,000 square feet of community space. There was a minimum wage requirement, which the former borough president, Ruben Diaz Jr., was very proud of, saying that that was going to be the case. So what you're saying is the whole thing has to be renegotiated. I mean, that CBA is now part of history, and what I just said is gone, and then we're going to literally start again. That's incredible to me.
Yeah. It's been a long process because I think that deal was announced 2012, I think. So it's finally sort of bit the dust earlier this year. And so, while it's sort of a lot to start the process over again, I think a lot of people are excited at having a new opportunity to sort of determine and dictate what's going to be in their neighborhood that they've lived in for years, and want to see redeveloped finally. And as you know, the Armory is huge and comes with just so many opportunities and possibilities that are just.
I'm going to ask you this now. I know that I forgot which federal official it was took a tour, and they did tour them around the Armory. Have you been in the building? Have you taken a little tour?
Yes, I was on that
Oh,
tour.
you were on that tour.
Yeah, I was on that tour, and it was Labor Secretary Marty Walsh,
Yes, that's
um,
what it was. Thank you.
who was being taken around with Congressman Adriano Espaillat. And so he was showing him the Armory along with EDC officials who, kind of knew the area a little better. And it really only scratched the surface. They took, show you the ground level and then a couple floors down, and there's still a bunch more to go.
I'm going to just tell you this because I did get a tour. Actually, it was with Mark Messier's people way back when they were doing it. And that level, it's one thing the drill floor, which is, it's like you could say you could have Madison Square Garden in there.
Yeah.
Not quite the garden with all the different levels, but you could run a 5,000 seat arena in there for all our basketball games and sports and concerts. You could run, it would be just an amazing venue. But below it, what people don't realize, there is a huge concourse that I just think could be, like the market that's like at Grand Central Station with local people, all the Bronx people coming out and being able to sell stuff. I just think that opportunity is immense as an economic generator for the borough. Am I on target? But you and I can do a quick vote. We'll pass the whole thing.
Nah, for sure. It's huge. It's massive. And I think, like you say, there are a lot of opportunities, which has people excited, including like the community and potential developers there. And so I agree. Like, I think part of the original plan was, or the last plan was to have a massive arena. And I still think that could be in play. But, organizers in particular are careful about throwing out what sort of potential ideas are.
Right. I want to get to one other topic before we run out of time. Do you think, this is just an opinion thing, do you think people are really going to be listened to? Because people in the Bronx have a chip on their shoulder that says it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter what we do. The powers that be, someone who's as powerful as Adriano Espaillat and working with the federal government, they're going to make a plan. They're going to hear us, but they're going to do what they want anyway.
We'll just have to see.
I'm terrible, I know.
We'll just
I've been around here too long, I think.
We'll just have to see, after this official feedback process, what the next plans are and how much that lines up with what community members wanted.
Yeah. So we will find out. I wanted to mention another thing, which has got a whole other point of view, a thing that's going on. You wrote about a guy named Moe Stien, who is the second generation owner of the iconic Frank's Sports Shop. He had died at 93. Just talk about, Mo is one thing to talk about, but these kinds of people who have really heart and soul have been in the borough of the Bronx. So your article was great. It was kind of a little bit of an obit and a little bit of a history thing. Just talk about Moe Stien and what he meant and what these kinds of people mean to the borough of the Bronx.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to memorialize him with my colleague Stefan Johnson. Moe Stien was someone who had been in the community for generations and had withstood, so many obstacles thrown at the Bronx for decades, which is a borough that is often, sort of looked down upon from other boroughs. And he was a representation of entrepreneurship, of caring for people. His son kind of described him as, a tough, stubborn, people first salesman. I think one of his quotes was, he could sell ice to the Eskimos. Was pretty funny.
Well, I think more importantly, he could sell a baseball jersey to a baseball fan, and that was much more. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you ever go in there? Have you ever been there?
I did.
I've been in there a number of times.
Yeah.
Bought stuff the one thing, it's like the old fashioned Army and Navy shop, where you'd go in and the other thing was talking to the people who work there was like me talking to you, a Bronxite. You would just talk to people who get it.
No, absolutely. Like people who work there are, from the Bronx or have very strong Bronx ties. I talked to one person who he had been working there for 14 years and, he very much respected Moe a lot. And, Moe had trained them and, Moe had meant a lot to him. I talked to someone else who grew up in the area, played basketball nearby and sort of came full circle. He had a change in career after he worked with people who, he was a counselor. And so after that, he kind of wanted to change and he found himself in retail at Frank's Sports Shop. And he never imagined that he would come back there,
There you go. Listen, we got to run Jonathan Custodio from The City. We are all going to read The City. We're going to look for what Jonathan writes about. We're going to be thrilled that one of our own TCB is taking care of business in our hometown. And it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. And we're going to look forward to reading everything you do at The City. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and hope to come back soon.
Yeah, that will happen. What we're going to do, we'll take a short break. We're going to talk about the great one. We're going to talk about Roberto Clemente and somebody who did something really special in the name of Clemente. And when you walked into Frank's Sports Shop, you could see Clemente's jersey up on the rafters there if you wanted to buy one. So there you go. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.